Chapter 4, Misha. Rebecca leaned back against the couch as if she had explained this many times before and no longer found the subject particularly unsettling. Her posture carried a relaxed patience, as if she had already moved beyond the panic I was still caught inside. When a person dies, she began, her gaze drifting to the ceiling as though the answer might be written somewhere above us, their soul returns to wherever their heart truly belongs. She spoke the sentence slowly, carefully, as if choosing each word with deliberate thought. That place doesn't have to be dramatic or symbolic, she continued. For some people, it's their childhood home. For others, it's a favorite park, a workplace, or the street where they spent most of their life. Wherever you felt most connected while you were alive tends to pull you back after your body gives out. Her eyes returned to me. You wander around there with the rest of us. Ghosts coexist with the living, whether the living notice us or not. I frowned slightly as the explanation descended in my thoughts. So, there are more of you. Rebecca nodded. Quite a few, actually. She rested her elbow against the back of the couch, her posture growing more conversational. We can all see each other. We talk, argue, complain, and watch the living stumble through their lives. In many ways, it feels oddly similar to being alive, except for the obvious inconvenience of no longer having a physical body. Her smile carried a trace of dark humor. No one truly understands why the rules work as they do, she added. We don't know who designed the system or whether it even has a designer. All we know is that eventually we start losing things. Losing what? I asked. Rebecca tapped her temple lightly. Memories. The word landed heavily between us. It doesn't happen all at once, she continued, her voice growing softer. At first, it's small details. Names of people you haven't thought about in years. Old addresses. The flavor of a dish you loved growing up. Then the larger pieces start slipping, too. I listened in silence, the implications beginning to form inside my mind. And after that? I asked. Rebecca's gaze drifted across the living room. When enough of those memories disappear, she said, the soul fades along with them. The explanation sounded strangely calm coming from her. Where do we go? I pressed. When that happens? Rebecca tilted her head slightly, considering how to answer. It isn't really a place, she replied. It's more, absence. My confusion must have shown immediately. She tried again. Think of it this way. Imagine a person slowly erasing a drawing from a piece of paper. At first, the lines become faint. Then the shapes begin to vanish entirely. Eventually, the page appears exactly the same as it did before the drawing existed. She glanced at me directly. That's what happens to us. The certainty in her tone unsettled me more than if she had delivered the explanation with fear. We disappear from existence. Her words landed without drama, yet they carried an undeniable finality. But it isn't painful, she added quickly. It's not some horrible second death. From what the older ghosts have told us, the process feels peaceful. When you reach the point where you've either accepted it all or forgotten enough that nothing ties you here anymore, you drift into what they describe as a deep sleep. Her fingers tapped lightly against the couch arm. And then you fade. I absorbed the explanation slowly. Ah, I murmured, though the word carried more confusion than understanding. Rebecca watched my face patiently while I tried to organize the growing list of questions forming inside my head. Eventually, one of them pushed to the surface. If all of that is true, I said carefully, why couldn't I see you before? Rebecca folded her arms across her chest and leaned back slightly, studying the question as if she had already spent considerable time thinking about it. There are a few theories, she replied. I waited. The most likely explanation, she continued, is that you hadn't fully accepted what happened to you. Her gaze softened as she spoke. You woke up after the accident and spent years watching your wife continue her life without ever truly acknowledging your own situation. A part of you still behaved as if you were simply observing things temporarily. She gestured gently around the room. As long as that denial remained strong, your mind probably refused to acknowledge the rest of us. You weren't ready to join the world you had entered. Her words struck closer to home than I wanted to admit. You had to reach the point where you truly accepted two things, she said. I swallowed. That you were dead, she finished. Her eyes held mine. And that the people you loved would eventually move forward without you. The sentence landed in my chest with painful precision. Moving forward, I murmured. My gaze drifted to the hallway where Zara had disappeared earlier. Maybe you're right, I admitted reluctantly. I think I've been drifting through the past years without really facing it. Rebecca waited patiently while I continued. I kept telling myself I was just watching over her, I said. Making sure she was okay. A bitter laugh escaped me. But the truth is I was just hiding from reality. The image of Zara standing in the kitchen returned to my mind. Her phone pressed against her shoulder. Her reluctant promise to Riley. It's okay to date again. The memory twisted inside my chest. That conversation tonight, I said, pressing my palm against the center of my chest as the familiar ache returned. When she said she was ready to start dating again. Rebecca nodded slowly. That likely dislodged a hidden piece within you, stirring what had long remained buried. Her hand sat gently on my shoulder. You stopped pretending. I stared down at the floor. It hurt, I admitted. Rebecca gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. It was also the first honest reaction you've had to your situation in years. I leaned back into the couch, exhaling slowly as the truth of her words fell into place. After a while, another question surfaced. What about the rest of them? Rebecca raised an eyebrow. The others you mentioned earlier, I clarified. Where are they? My gaze moved around the room instinctively, half expecting a crowd of invisible strangers to suddenly appear in the corners of the living room. Are there ghosts walking around this house right now? Rebecca followed my gaze with mild amusement. Well, she said thoughtfully, not at this exact second. I straightened slightly. But they are nearby, she continued. Most of us stay within the neighborhood where we died or spent most of our lives. I shifted slightly on the couch, trying to organize the growing pile of information Rebecca had just placed in my lap. My mind still struggled to accept the idea that an entire community of ghosts had been wandering around the same neighborhood while I spent years pacing the house alone, convinced I was the only one stuck in this strange half-existence. There's something else I want to know, I said carefully. Rebecca tilted her head in encouragement. Are there any ghosts attached to this house? I asked. I mean, besides me. Rebecca nodded immediately, as though the answer had been obvious all along. Yes, she replied. 2 of them actually. My curiosity sharpened at once. They've been here far longer than you have, she added casually. I'll introduce you in a bit. She studied me for a moment before continuing. Any other questions floating around in that head of yours? I hesitated briefly before speaking again. There's one more thing, I admitted. Rebecca waited. What happened to you? I asked, my gaze settling on her with cautious curiosity. You mentioned you were killed next door. Who did it? Rebecca's expression softened into a hint of amusement, replacing the earlier trace of unease. Oh, she said lightly. That story. She leaned back against the couch as though relaxing into a well-practiced anecdote. It happened a long time ago, she began. Back when flip phones were still impressive technology. Her lips curved into a crooked smile. My charming boyfriend decided he preferred another woman and figured the easiest tactic to pursue that new romance was to fucking remove me from the equation entirely. I stared at her. You're serious? Rebecca nodded. Very. She waved her hand dismissively. Fucker thought he was clever about it, too. Planned the whole thing carefully. Her grin widened with a flash of dark satisfaction. Unfortunately for the loser, he turned out to be far less intelligent than he imagined. The police caught him before he had time to enjoy his new cursed life. And now? I asked. Rebecca's eyes sparkled. Now he's spending the rest of his numbered days inside a prison cell. She burst into loud laughter, the sound echoing freely through the living room. Watching her laugh like that carried an oddly calming effect. The story itself should have been horrifying, yet Rebecca treated it with such blunt humor that it stripped the situation of its darkness. For the first time since Zara mentioned dating, my thoughts loosened their grip on that painful subject. The panic that had been clawing through my chest eased slightly. Rebecca eventually wiped a non-existent tear from the corner of her eye. "Anyway," she said cheerfully, rising from the couch, "enough about my tragic romantic history." She reached down and grabbed my arm, pulling me upright with unexpected enthusiasm. "Let's go meet the others." I blinked. "The ghosts attached to the house?" Rebecca nodded. "They're probably in the attic." I instinctively turned to the staircase and started walking up it. Before I reached the first step, Rebecca grabbed my wrist and pulled me back around. "Hello?" she said, fixing me with a stare that suggested I had just attempted an act of pure absurdity. "Why are you walking?" I frowned. "To get upstairs?" Her grin widened with playful disbelief. "We can float, remember?" She pointed upward to the ceiling. "No stairs required." I stared at the staircase for a moment before bringing my palm to my face. "I keep forgetting that," I admitted. Rebecca laughed and drifted upward through the ceiling as effortlessly as smoke rising through the air. I followed her. The familiar sensation of passing through solid material surrounded me as we moved through the floor above. The structure of the house appeared briefly around us, wooden beams, insulation, pipes running through the walls, before the attic opened once again above our heads. With a gentle upward push, we emerged into the attic. This time, the room wasn't empty. Several figures sat scattered across the floor near the center of the room, arranged loosely in what seemed like a casual circle. Their shapes carried the same faint translucence Rebecca had, though each one possessed clear individual features. As soon as they noticed us, several of them smiled. A couple exchanged amused glances. One of them even let out a chuckle. I hesitated awkwardly before returning their smiles. "So, she finally made it," one of them said. The voice belonged to a tall man sitting cross-legged near a stack of old boxes. His posture carried a relaxed confidence, and his thick British accent rolled through the attic with easy charm. "We were beginning to suspect you were deliberately ignoring us," he continued. Another figure spoke before I had time to respond. "I told you she wasn't ignoring anyone," said a teenage boy sitting nearby. His posture leaned forward with youthful impatience. She was still figuring things out. Rebecca floated down beside the group with a satisfied expression. "See," she said. "I told you all she would come around eventually." One of the figures rose gracefully to her feet. The woman wore a long dress that seemed to belong to another century entirely. Her hair had been arranged in an elegant bun, and her posture carried a refined composure shaped by a far more formal era. "Well then," she said pleasantly, clasping her hands together. "Now that we are all properly gathered, it would be polite to introduce ourselves." She stepped closer to me. "I am Mrs. Martin, darling," she said with a warm smile. "I died in this very house in 1899 and have remained here ever since. Although it's been rebuilt several times since then." I blinked. 1899, Mrs. Martin nodded proudly. "Yes indeed. This attic has hosted far more interesting company over the years than most people realize." I extended my hand automatically. "My name is Misha Kapoor," I said. "It's nice to meet you." Mrs. Martin accepted the handshake with elegant grace. "Oh, we already know who you are, darling." She winked mischievously. "I've been living in this house long enough to know quite a bit about its occupants." Mrs. Martin's playful wink lingered in my mind as I lowered my hand again, still trying to absorb the surreal reality that an entire collection of ghosts had apparently been sharing my house for years while I wandered around believing I was completely alone. Before I could respond to her remark, another figure rose from the floor. The man who stepped forward carried a posture shaped by impeccable manners. His clothing seemed distinctly early 20th century, pressed trousers, suspenders, and a neatly buttoned shirt that belonged to a fashion era long gone. His dark hair had been combed carefully to one side, and his appearance carried a polite restraint that reminded me of old photographs from history books. He extended his hand to me. "I am Stanley Dunham," he said in a rich British accent that rolled through the attic with graceful clarity. "I died in this house in 1932 and have had the unfortunate luck of remaining here ever since." His tone carried a dry sense of humor that made the statement feel less tragic than it should have. I accepted his handshake with a small smile. "Nice to meet you, Stanley," I replied. "And I'm sorry I wasn't able to see you earlier." My nose wrinkled slightly as I spoke. For years I've been walking around this house convinced I was the only one stuck here. Stanley dismissed the apology with a small wave of his hand. "It hardly matters now," he said calmly. "You can see us today, which means whatever barrier existed before has finally lifted." He gave my hand one last polite shake before stepping back and returning to the spot where he had been sitting among the others. Another figure rose next. The teenage boy I had noticed earlier shoved his palms into the pockets of his hoodie as he approached. His posture carried a restless energy, as if he had died far too young and never quite shed the enthusiasm of adolescence. "I'm Adam Heck," he said casually. "Technically, I was the most recent death around here." He shrugged. "Well, until you showed up." I couldn't help smiling slightly at his blunt introduction. "Hi Adam," I said. "You seem to understand this whole death and afterlife situation better than I do." Adam's grin widened immediately. "I had a weird fascination with this stuff when I was alive," he replied. "Ghost stories, paranormal theories, weird internet forums. I spent years reading about what might happen after people die." He gave a playful wink. "Turns out some of it wasn't completely wrong." I opened my mouth to ask another question, but Rebecca stepped forward before the conversation could continue. "There will be plenty of time for discussions later," she said, addressing the small group gathered in the attic. "Right now we have a more urgent situation." Her gaze landed squarely on me. "Misha's wife is preparing to start dating again," she announced. The words echoed through the attic, bouncing off the old wooden beams overhead. "Well," Rebecca continued, "technically she already has a date planned for this Saturday." Several heads turned to me immediately. The attention made my stomach tighten again. Before anyone could respond, a loud thud cracked through the attic. The sudden noise made me jump violently. A small cardboard box slid off one of the shelves near the wall and hit the wooden floor with a sharp bang. Its contents spilled outward as the lid burst open, old photographs scattering across the boards like fallen leaves. "What the hell was that?" I shouted instinctively. Mrs. Martin examined around the attic with a knowing sigh. "That would be Kathy," she said calmly. "Kathy?" I repeated. Adam leaned back on his palms, clearly amused. "She enjoys dramatic entrances." My confusion deepened. "Who exactly is Kathy?" Before anyone could answer, a subtle motion stirred among the scattered photographs. A small orange shape darted across the floor. Adam chuckled. "That," he said, pointing lazily to the movement, "is Kathy." I stared. An orange cat trotted proudly into the center of the attic, her translucent body glowing faintly under the dim attic light. Her tail curved upward in confident arrogance as she strutted across the wooden boards as if the entire house belonged to her. "Wait," I said slowly. "That's a ghost cat?" Adam nodded. "A particularly chaotic one." Mrs. Martin sighed with long-suffering patience. "She has been haunting this area longer than any of us." The cat ignored the conversation entirely as she wandered between the group, brushing her body casually against everyone's legs as though greeting old friends. "That's adorable," I murmured without thinking. I crouched down slightly and extended my fingers to her. Rebecca reacted immediately. "Careful," she warned. "That little demon has an attitude." I hesitated but continued reaching anyway. The cat turned her head to my approaching fingers. Her pupils narrowed. The instant my fingertips came close, she hissed and swiped her paw forward with lightning speed. Her claws slashed across my fingers in a sharp motion that would have drawn blood if I still possessed a physical body. I jerked my hand back in surprise. "Well," I muttered, inspecting my fingers even though there was no injury to examine. "That was rude." Rebecca laughed. "I told you she's a mean bitch." The cat strutted proudly, clearly satisfied with the chaos she had caused. "Did she die here too?" I asked, glancing at Rebecca. Rebecca tilted her head, considering it for a beat. "Along those lines." She watched the cat leap onto one of the attic beams with natural grace. "No one really knows her full story. Kathy has been wandering this neighborhood longer than any of us can remember." Her gaze transferred to Mrs. Martin. "Even longer than our dear Victorian resident." Mrs. Martin sniffed slightly but didn't argue. "She appears whenever she pleases and disappears just as unpredictably," Rebecca continued. "We stopped trying to figure her out a long time ago." Adam nodded in agreement. "She's basically chaos with whiskers." I leaned back against one of the support beams, watching the ghostly cat circle the attic as though inspecting her kingdom. "That's fascinating," I murmured. Stanley cleared his throat politely. "Returning to the original matter," he said, glancing between Rebecca and me, "did you say your wife intends to marry again?" The question struck me as a physical blow. "No." The word snapped out of me before I had time to filter it. Every ghost in the attic glanced at me at once. "She's not getting married," I said quickly, my chest tightening again as the thought forced deeper into my mind. "She's just going on a date." The distinction sounded fragile even to my own ears. Because now that the idea had been spoken aloud, it refused to leave my thoughts. Dating led to relationships. Relationships led to love. And love eventually led somewhere permanent. The possibility pierced me, like a splinter that refused to come out. I stood there surrounded by ghosts in the attic of my own house, suddenly realizing that the future I had been ignoring might already be beginning without me.